Welcome back to the channel, fellow aviators. I am excited to be back with you. I apologize for the lack of content last weekend. I was setting up a brand new series with a new career mode add-on called Fly the Line. That series is entirely focused on flying jets, and unlike this and my on-air series, you use all your skill points to level up your character, and it's focused on the life of an airline pilot. I'll leave a link down in the description below, and if I remember, I'll put a card right here on the screen for you to check it out. Much like in this series where I do spend some time trying to teach, in that series, I'm also trying to maybe demystify flying the larger jets. I know from talking to people on my Discord and elsewhere that it can be somewhat maybe even confusing or intimidating when they get into a jet for the first time and there's just a mass of buttons and dials. And so the goal for me is to make that a very realistic series. We will be using GSX Pro to simulate catering, refueling, passenger boarding. We'll be using Beyond ATC, say intentions. I will be sprinkling in some real world anecdotes from some of the lessons I learned as an airline pilot. But one of the main goals is just to break down each individual jet that we fly so you understand why we're doing the things we're doing, how to get things done correctly, and so you can have a really enjoyable experience because there's a lot of really great jets out there that are really fun to fly. All right, so enough about that. If we look up at the top, you see the company is doing pretty well. We have about $142,000 in the bank. I still have my AI pilot. He's very inexpensive, cost me around $500 a day. And one of the subscribers had a really great comment for me. Instead of selling the 182 like I was planning on doing, why not just give it to him and have him generate even more money? And that has worked out really well. Just about every flight he does, he puts in about makes about $10,000 per flight. I don't spend a lot of time with him, but I do. Maybe when I log in, I'll just send him off on a mission for the day, and at least he pays for his food. As you see at the very top, I have also purchased the Comanche. I was able to find a really great deal since our last flight. I think I spent about $215,000 on it. And so I'm really looking forward to bringing this aircraft in particular into this series. Primarily because it is considered one of the best aircrafts ever produced in any category for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I would be hard-pressed to think of a piston single that is remotely close to it. So what makes it such a great aircraft? Well, first of all, the owner, president of A2A Studios, owns a Comanche 250, so it has been recreated in exact detail. Second, the flight modeling is superb, and the systems are very deep. It's not necessarily failures that I really respect or enjoy when I describe an aircraft as being very realistic. In reality, it's very unlikely you'll even have a catastrophic failure. I've only had one in the 15,000 hours I've been flying, and that was when I was flying off the back of a tuna boat like 1,000 miles off the coast of Peru. And I'll just let you decide how well you think Mexican maintenance was down there. They paid a lot of money though, but I really appreciate systems depth. So I'm really, again, excited to bring this aircraft. It's got some very unique quirks, which we will get into with its autopilot system. But before we get started, one last thing. As always, I always ask you to like, subscribe, and comment. It helps out the channel. And in fact, it really, really does. Last week, I was notified that I had reached the threshold for monetization on YouTube. It's something that I think less than 5% of all YouTube channels actually ever obtain. And that's all thanks to you, everyone who has liked and commented, gave me some feedback. So once again, thank you all very much. It does work. I think we just passed over 2,500 subscribers. All this is done in, I think, around 9-10 months. So once again, a very large thank you to everyone who has taken the time. I truly appreciate it. Definitely keeps me motivated and keep me going. All right, so let's just get out to the aircraft. We spent a lot of time here just looking at this blank screen, and let's get underway. I have picked up, by the way, I picked up a flight already. We're heading out to Vegas, baby. One of the great things with as we get larger and larger aircraft is we can now expand our range of where we get to go. So we're no longer taking those. If you all remember from episode 1 when I was in the 152, we're doing like a 30 or 40 mile flight. We can now expand out. I think this is roughly 250 miles or something like that. So anyways, let's jump out to the aircraft and let's get started with the Comanche 250 from A2A Studios. Okay, everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to bring up a couple of quick points. Number one, this aircraft has been fully updated for 24. And what I mean by that is if you've ever brought any aircraft over from 2020, what you will notice is there are no collisions. And so they have updated this aircraft for 24. The next thing, because it's a aircraft from 2020, if you are thinking about getting this, I want to let you know that the developers, A2A, are still providing updates. So don't think, if you're thinking about getting this, you like what you see, like, oh, maybe I'm getting a dead aircraft or something's going to come out better. This aircraft, I think the last update, honestly, was like 3 weeks ago. So they are continually trying to improve and refine the aircraft to this day. And then the third thing, and this is more for NeoFly, when we have to put in our weights to make everything match up, I was not able to do it using the included EFB. There's a secondary EFB provided by A2A. That is how I got all the weights to match. So I just want to bring that up really quickly. Now, I said that it's fully compatible with 24, but one of the things they kept is their old legacy walk-around system from 2020. So let's just hop in the aircraft and get going. So as I mentioned before, there, of course, is we have our normal standard provided EFB, as you see here. We can get rid of that, but we do have the included EFB from A2A. And when you first get the aircraft, this is where you're going to want to head to. It has some setup items. In the flight info side, you see at the very top, we have our environmentals, which is really great. And at a glance, you can figure out where the wind is coming from. So if you haven't picked up ATIS or you're not using Beyond ATC or something like that, you can generally figure out which runway to use. Below that, we have our fuel state. So you can see we have our fuel economy, range, ground speed, all that stuff. And below that, as you all know, I like to give you all the numbers so we can fly this aircraft as realistically as possible. And I'm always throwing out like VX, VY, VLE, whole bunch of random numbers for you guys. But they include everything right here. So you can see what our takeoff, what our flap speeds are. So that's really just kind of great, useful information. Probably more importantly, what you're going to see here is that we have the ability to change our nav and our comm on the fly. And so I've set up for the GTN 750. As you all know, that is my favorite GPS to use. But we could go old school and have no GPS. We could just do a typical 430, the more advanced 530, or the dual 530 and 430 combination. That's pretty cool. We have engine heaters and jacks. The engine heaters obviously are going to be something really important if you are flying around in cold weather. Keep in mind, I said this was modeled really, really well. And they have modeled what it's like to start an aircraft with oil that has not been preheated. You will find that in the oil pressure gauge, it simply doesn't work or it takes a long time to work before it gets going. So you definitely want to use the engine heaters. We can change our auto starts, cold, dark. We see all that kind of stuff. This is where I found if I wanted to change the actual weights for the passengers for NeoFly, I had to change them right here in this section. Of course, there's a maintenance section, as you might expect with an A2A product. And here we have great things. You can see like the engine analyzers, all that kind of stuff. So you will actually see how slowly the oil comes up if it's cold. And here's where we find the walk around. So let's go ahead and start the walk around process. So the very first thing we're going to want to do the walk around is we're going to come down here and we're going to take off this very high-tech gust lock. We'll go ahead and remove our yoke for now. And what we're going to want to do is just turn on our master switch on, and then we're just going to turn our lights on so we can see them during the walk around. The next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and put in our flaps. And then, if I can remember my keybind right here, we want to make sure our fuel is in the on position, which is full forward. When you come to the aircraft, it will be like this. All right, so now let's come back up here and let's go to our very first station. And it brings up here, and all you're doing here, you hear that sound? That's what you would do on an actual walk around. And you're just making sure that the flaps actually lock. And then we just click to our next spot. And of course, we'll check our ailerons. We'll come here, do a visual inspection of our tank. But if you remember, we don't actually have a whole lot of fuel in there. If you were able to catch that, so we can close it. And then we have another subcategory right here. And this is why you want to have the fuel pumps on, or not the fuel pumps, but the fuel valves open, is when we want to do and check our fuel. You grab it. And you're looking for that light blue color right there. That is a couple of 100 low lead. And if you have water in there, it's completely clear. And it'll be sitting on the bottom, right? So we'll throw it right on the ground where the EPA likes it. And then we'll move on to our next section here. We've got our light. Perfect. That's what we want to see. We'll click there and remove our tie down. We can come up here, and then we will check our other tanks, which should be full. And of course, this is the way you really want to check your fuel tanks in the real world when you're flying a GA aircraft. You are going to find that fuel gauge, it's just a float in there, and sometimes it can get stuck. You can get mismatches. So this is generally how you're going to want to confirm that you have a full tank. Go ahead and close that up. Go to our next spot here, remove the chocks. Ask me if I've ever tried to take off my personal plane without removing the chocks. The answer is yes. Yes, I have. If you don't have the fuel valve open, though, you will not be able to get the fuel out of this tank. Once again, right on the ground where the EPA likes it. I'm sorry. And I didn't close it, but you see it will close automatically if you forget to close. Here you're just checking the condition of the prop. There's nothing interactive that you can do. We will check our oil. And we're checking quantity, which we have, and you're checking the color, right? We have a very light, it's probably very hard to even see, but as that engine oil begins to break down, it'll turn black. So that will be modeled as well. We can close that. We can move over and check our other fuel tank. That's great. Come down here, remove the chocks. Pitot-static cover, tie down, landing light, tip tanks. We're not going to see anything out of this one unless they are full. Close that up. And yes, you would still actually check it in the real world too, because you want to make sure that that fuel tank cap is properly secured. They can work themselves open. You see we have our landing light or our nav light on right there. And we just grab it here towards the bottom. Check our fuel. Come around the back side. Ailerons. Go to our flaps, make sure they lock. Hear that sound. Pitot-static cover or port. Make sure that is clean and clear of obstructions. No bug has decided to make his home there. And come back here and remove our tie down. And normally here, as I would rotate this up and down, I'd be sticking my head right inside there and looking at, we call it the Jesus nut that's inside there, making sure that is nice and secured. Your flight, you're going to have a very bad day if that breaks back there. Let's move this over. Oh, we're just checking the pitot-static port right there. And then if you like, for the added realism, you can load your bag in and pretend to be a corporate pilot. That's why I've never really bothered to fly corporate. And at that point, we just click inside and we have completed the walk around. So that is how we had to do it old school in 2020. And very few aircraft actually had that ability. It was actually, when this came out, this was like a really, really big deal. All right. So now that we've done that, we can come in here. We'll turn our lights off. Get rid of that. And we now can turn off our master battery. And just before we get going really quickly, we have a unique setup here. Normally we have our throttle is normally on the full left-hand side. Then we would have our prop and then our mixture, but you can see they've kind of not inverted everything, but they've just changed it. Remember, this is stuff from the 60s and everything wasn't quite standard the way it is now. So our throttle, which is in black, is always in the center. Prop is always blue and mixture is always red. At least they have kept that. All right, so from now, let's go ahead and bring up our tablet again. We'll go to the flight info and click right here. I said we have aircraft. The next tab is checklist. And also we have emergencies. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that one of the things I wasn't a big fan was failures. And the reason is it doesn't happen that often in the real world. Obviously, for most of us who are going to maybe fly this aircraft and put maybe 25, 50, maybe even 100 hours on it, the odds of you having anything wrong is almost infinitesimal. But my main objection normally tends to be if you do have an engine failure, how are you going to respond? Most of us don't have access to the pilot's operating handbook. And so if you have an engine failure or an electrical problem, well, what are you supposed to do? So at least here, which I really appreciate, if you're going to have failures, they have listed some of these failures that you can deal with, right? So once again, I just appreciate the fact that if they are going to have a failure system, that you have a way to, if we have a power loss in flight, how do you respond? It's listed for you. And that's what would happen in the pilot's operating handbook. And that is how we operate in the airlines. In the airlines, we do nothing without a checklist. There is no kind of freewheeling it and trying to figure it out on the go. We are using a very rigid structure. And so I appreciate if you're going to have a failure system for us, then you give us a way to, if you'd like to study beforehand, study it, or at least have a way to deal with it, pull it up quickly. All right, so let's go to the checklist. Well, due to the miracle that is modern editing, you guys do not have to ride along with me as I went through my struggle session. Flight Simulator 24 just upgraded to SU3, and in the process, I guess, it completely destroyed all my camera views, all my keybinds. My Bravo throttle quadrant was doing all sorts of weird stuff. So it's taking me about an hour and a half, but I think I've got everything sorted out. With the exception, I can't get the parking brake to work off my throttle quadrant, but we can work around that. All right, so let's start with the before engine start. So number one, pre-flight complete. Passengers briefed, seatbelt secure, control lock removed. That was that very high-tech bungee cord we had right down here. Parking brake is set. Gear switch is down. The gear switch is right here, that orange switch right there. Flaps are up. That is in the up position that you see. That's very common in general aviation aircraft. And that would be down. All right, so that's in the full up position. Radios are off. Autopilot master. This is the autopilot master. We've got an autopilot disconnect, an altitude engage, but this is the autopilot master. We'll talk more about the S-Tech autopilot later, but basically when you hit the switch, all it does is warm up the engine. Actually, nothing actually happens, but we will talk about that in just a moment. Avionics master is off. All electrical switches are off, and all of our circuit breakers are in. These are hard to see. If we come down here, right here are our circuit breakers. That is in the in position. I know they're hard to see. Out, they would look like this. And because it is an A2A study level, I would double check that the circuit breakers are actually in. I definitely have found them in black square aircraft randomly being off. All right, circuit breakers are in and rotating beacon is on. And I think I've already preset that as normal. Rotating beacon is on. All right, engine start. Fuel selector, desired tank. We'll come down here. I have them both set to on. You could start on only one if you like. I don't see a reason why you would need to do that, so I'm just going to leave them both on for now. Mixture is fully rich. Once again, we'll come down here. It's got that unique system. We'll put mixture full rich. Throttle is cracked just a little bit. Carb heat is off. That is right here. That is the carb heat. Master switch is on. And the next thing we're going to turn on the fuel pump. So two things we're going to want to see. We're going to want to hear sorry, two things. We want to hear the fuel pump, and we want to see an increase in fuel pressure. Depending on how cold it is outside, it may or may take a little bit longer for you to see the increase in the pressure. So let's go ahead and turn the fuel pressure on. We can hear that hum, and now we're just looking at the fuel pressure gauge. Comes up into the green. That's what we want to see. We'll put the fuel pump back off. Primer, 1 to 5 strokes. So how much should you prime, especially in a study level aircraft? Well, the answer really depends on how warm or cold the engine is. A warm engine will take less prime, and a cold engine will take a little bit more. The danger, of course, is over priming an engine, and then you flood it, and now you're just kind of stuck, is that you have to wait for all the fuel to drain back out, which can take a little bit of time. So I always tend to prime a little bit less, but what we're going to do is we'll just go ahead and right-click, and we'll use 3, and we'll do 4 right in the middle. Then we'll right-click. That closes it. So we now put the primer. The mags are in the both position they are, and then we are going to clear the prop, engage the starter, and then we're going to check for our oil pressure. Pretty standard stuff. So let's go ahead and start. And all these starts are modeled differently.
You're good to go. Contact the tower for clearance.
Right, depending on how often when was your last start, you can find yourself rotating here. They've literally modeled out, because every start is different. It's going to be, I don't know if it's random how they choose it, but you will find sometimes it starts easy, sometimes it starts a little bit more difficult. All right, and now we're just checking for our oil pressure to come up. It has, and our mixture, we can lean that out as required. We're down at sea level, we can pull a little bit out. One of the reasons you might want to do that is you could potentially foul the plug, so I would think it would take a lot of tax around it, very, very rich for that to be a problem. All right, so let's move over to the taxi checklist. All right, primer is locked. Avionics master. I'm sorry, wrong one. Avionics master on. Radio's on. Transponder as required. That'll be in our GTN 750. Altimeter is set. Let's go ahead and set field elevation, which is about 120 feet here in Torrance. Heading indicator set. So this is something we can check here in controls. And what we want to look for is gyro drift right down here at the bottom. I'll circle that. If you have that engaged, every gyro, you'll have to update that about every 15 minutes or so. So I have that, and that's what happens in the real world. I've just kind of turned that off. That's just like one extra thing that I don't think I particularly would like to deal with. But if you want to be super, super accurate, you're going to want to get on the right camera view, number 1, and then you're going to want to match up the compass with the HSI down here below. So I am leaving that off because I just think it's a nuisance for me, especially most all the aircraft we're flying these days has all that stuff. All right, so transponders required. Altimeter, heading indicator set, landing gear lamp is up, right? So we're like making sure that we have green down here. You can barely see it. It is green. Nav lights as required. Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't have to pay for any of the... Now, when I owned my Mooney, I was pretty more judicious, but I don't have to pay for any of the light bulbs, so they're all coming on. Parking brake release and brakes on initial roll test. And then we're just going to bring it out to the run-up area. So what I'll do is, I know this is getting very wordy, so let me go ahead and just taxi it out, and I will meet you as we do the run-up. And it's nothing we haven't seen before. We're just going to be checking the mags. We're going to be checking the prop, but I'll walk you through that process, and we will get underway and get out to Vegas, baby. All right. See you in just a second. All right, everybody, we are ready for our run-up checklist. So number 1, position into the wind, brakes are checked. Fuel quantity, we can come down here. We can check our fuel quantity, and if we look a little bit lower, just below the mixture, you see there is our auxiliary tank, and we can click left and right. We'll leave that on the left for now. Mixture is required. Throttle 2,000 RPM. So we'll go ahead and bring our throttle all the way up. And from here, we just want to check our, once again, we're going to check our oil pressure, fuel pressure, our amps that we're charging, oil temperature is good, cylinder head temperature, and then just to the right of that is our gyro suction. You want at least 4. That checks. And from now, we are going to do our typical mag check. So we'll check number 1. Slight decrease, around 125. We'll check the second. Yeah, so that one's definitely a little bit rougher. And then from there, we are going to check our prop. So we're just going to pull our prop back. And as we do that, go ahead and watch the oil pressure. Watch how it drops. And that's what we want to see. And we'll cycle that 3 times. Cabin heat as required. Southern California, don't need it. All right, before takeoff. Controls, let's do free. And clear, those check. Rudder trim, neutral, doors latched. I guess we can probably put our window up here. We can also put on our headset to make it a little bit quieter. Fuel selector, desired tank, fuel pump is on. Mixture full rich, prop full forward, carb heat off, engine gauge is checked. One last time, pitot heat as required. Southern California, don't need it. Strobes on and landing lights on. I've already got all the lights on. So the procedure here is we're just going to take off to straight ahead, a right-hand turn as we head towards Vegas. We've already got our runway heading set of about 290. We can fine tune it once we get on the runway. And then we're going to go to a heading about 037. We're going to talk about the autopilot in just a second, but it is very important. Let me pull up the, as you look over to the left, you see our course is 037, our track. You need to make sure the CDI, the yellow needle, is pointed in the direction that you need to go in. In other aircraft, you can be a little bit lazy because the autopilot picks up the signal from the GPS. The autopilot in this unit picks it up from the actual HSI. So we have to be very cognizant of where that needle is pointing. Now, the first thing we do is we can put our autopilot on, and what you see here on that STEC unit, no, the autopilot's actually not engaging. It's just going through its startup sequence. If we want to engage it, we're going to have to press this button right here, which brings us into different modes. All right, so we are going to want to be in high when we engage the autopilot again. So let us go ahead and taxi out to the runway, and we will get going. And we'll talk a little bit about the autopilot after we take off here. All right, so let's drop the brake. And on this flight, I will not be using Beyond ATC or Say Intentions once again. Anytime I have to do a lot of yippity yapping, it just gets a little bit more difficult. But I will be using Say Intentions and or Beyond ATC as we continue with this series. And just so we don't have any problems, we're going to go ahead and disengage that autopilot. That's fine. That green is know that's no longer engaged, which is what we want. We don't need any random supplies on takeoff. All right, so the procedure is around 85 knots. So let's go ahead and prop is full forward, and we will bring throttle full forward. You see that nice little pull to the left? We like that. That lets us know that they have modeled in P factor. All right, coming up around 85 knots. Little aft cyclic. Aft cyclic. Who's been flying helicopters a lot still?
Pilot, have a nice flight.
We'll aft on the yoke. We'll just head out. Around 100 knots, I think, is a pretty good climb out speed. If you look up there, that is our trim. Just going to kind of trim it out for around 85 knots. Or I'm sorry, around 95 knots or so. 100 works good. All right, 500 feet, we can start a little bit of a right turn. And we'll just kind of get ourselves right on course. The one thing about this autopilot, it will not intercept a course very well. You pretty much need to be on course when you're flying. So I know in a lot of the other pilot, we're taking a real big step back here with this autopilot system in terms of functionability and usability. So if you are off, you're trying to intercept like a 30-degree, 25-degree intercept angle, it just will blow right through it. This is a very old tech system. So I'm just trying to trim out the aircraft, keep a nice rate of climb up, and we're gonna have to get over those mountain ranges. So we'll probably could go up to about, I don't know, 7,000-8,000 feet. Once again, when you level out, we're gonna have to trim out leveling out, but we'll talk a little bit about that as we get a little bit closer. All right, so normally what we want to do is we want to climb out at around 25 inches of manifold pressure and about 2,500 RPM. It's got a little bit of a left-hand roll, but we can deal with that. So what we will do is the first thing we'll do is we'll bring down our manifold pressure to around 25. And then we'll square it up, as we like to say, and bring down our RPM to about 25. Right about there. We can hold that. And we will continue our climb. So the autopilot system. We look down at the S-TEC, we see the green. That means that the autopilot master is on and it is ready to go to work. We have a couple different modes. The very first mode we're going to have is basically an attitude hold mode. So what we want to do is if we click in here, and now if we want to turn, we can use our little knob up here to turn. Let's just kind of go to, we're going to go direct to high. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to make a little bit more sense, but we're going to go into high accuracy. So we're in low accuracy now. We hit the button one more time. We're now in high accuracy. And all that is doing is, let's say you were tracking a VOR and you were a long ways away, you might get a lot of false signals. And so when you put it in low, it kind of dampens out some of those signals for us. We can use our typical heading mode if we like. So if I we'll go to heading, continue, click one more time. So that is kind of our attitude hold. We go to heading. Now if we use our heading indicator, it will turn and follow our heading. That's fine. We'll click it one more time. We go into low tracking. If we were going to want high tracking, that's going to be for our FMS. If you're doing an ILS approach, you're going to want to put it in high. Very really little chance you're really ever going to use low. And the same thing for like the attitude hold. Really not going to be using that a lot. We're either using heading or we're going to be using the high right here. So let's go ahead and just sync up our heading right there. And now you're going to see it's going to start to, this is once again, it's not a super exact system. It's going to be kind of fluctuating back and forth. This is technology from the 60s. All right, we are continuing to climb up to 3,000 feet. So I just need to, let me pull back out of here. And I'm just going to go ahead and trim out a little bit more aft so we can get a little bit more of a climb going. Now as we're above 3,000 feet, I'm just going to start pulling a little bit out on the mixture. So this, like I said before, this is really kind of a step back from anything we've even flown before. The 182 kind of had its own weird quirks, but at least we were able to do, it was able to intercept a radius or a radial and come in. We were able to pre-select an altitude. In this instance here, we're going to kind of need to get up to our altitude before we and trim it out before we engaged the altitude hold. So it is a little bit of a different system. It's going to take a lot more work ahead of time, but I think it should be a lot more fun. All right, everybody, I am back with you. Decided to just cut out a large section there because we really needed to get up to about 12,000 feet. As you're seeing, we're just kind of getting up to that very first mountain range right now. So to hold an altitude, we can do that, but we need to trim out the aircraft ahead of time. So let's go ahead and start trimming out a little bit so we can get to level flight. And what's going to happen is when we engage the wings, our altitude hold, if we don't have, matter of fact, I'll just do it now just to show you. So we'll come down here, out engaging, or right here on the stick. So if you are the yoke, geez, I'm flying too much helicopter. So hit out engaging. See, the yoke will move a little bit, but if we get ourselves out of trim, as we pick up speed here, I'm expecting we will be a little bit, we'll get a beeping and a tone to let us know. So let's see if, as we start to accelerate, there we go. That's what I was looking for. Let's zoom in here a little bit. So it's telling us trim down, which is what we, of course, would expect. So we'll just trim down a little bit. So it's not going to readjust our trim for us. Like I said, this is really an old school autopilot. And we'll kind of wait, kind of get up to our speed here. I'm probably looking for around probably about 140 knots is what I'm guessing indicated. We go, a little bit more. So we'll just trim a little bit more as we pick up a little bit of speed. That's exactly what we would expect. And if we were to trim too much the other way, what would happen is we'd start getting another, it would start beeping again, but this time it would be in the up position, not the down position. So that's how you know if you're in trim. So once again, you're going to have to kind of get yourself trimmed out before you engage autopilot or for the altitude hold. And the same thing, I'll bring this to a fix, but you're going to find even when we're navigating in this mode, if we're navigating in this mode, what we're going to see is that it will not actually track like outbound very well, unless if it's a large deviation. So we'll see that in a little bit here. All right, everybody, looks like we're trimmed out here at about 12,000 feet. We are on course. We've got another 163 nautical miles to go that we've picked up speed here to about 130 knots indicated or so. So let me go ahead and kick you out here. We've got a really long and kind of boring flight here over the desert, and I will rejoin you as we're getting a little bit closer to Vegas. All right? I will see you all in just a second. All right, everybody, I am back with you. We are heading over to Boulder City, which is the VOR right there. And what we're looking to do is, when I was coming in from LA, I knew there was some mountainous terrain out here, so I thought instead of going direct to Vegas, I would take it directly out to the Boulder City VOR, just because I knew we needed to avoid a couple hills around here. So I can descend at this point down to about 8,000 feet or so. So the procedure we're going to want to use is we're going to want to disengage our autopilot, or no, sorry, not our autopilot, our altitude hold. And then at this point, what we can do is just use our trim and power and start a nice, smooth, ready descent. The difficulty, of course, here is going to be that as we start our descent, and as we're seeing right now, the aircraft starts to accelerate, it generates more lift, and then the climb stops. And so just kind of getting this all worked out where we can figure out a nice power setting, nice rate of descent, and kind of hold it, because we really don't want to come down too fast, mostly at the altitudes we're working at, right? You know, as I'm hitting here 1500, now it's kind of bouncing back up. It can be a little bit problematic, especially when you're actually trying to descend, right? And one of the mistakes, you know, here I'm going to hit up to about 2,000 feet per minute, just using the electric trim. And so what I probably need to do is really just kind of use the manual trim wheel, a little bit more fine touch for me. The other thing I'm going to kind of demonstrate, and it's going to work out okay for us, but because mostly the turn in from Boulder City to the next fix, which is Larry, is relatively, it's a small angle. You see here, it's like, I don't know, whatever heading I'm on, I have to kind of head kind of north. It'll make that turn, but it's going to make that turn really, really slow. And so really the preferred method's going to be is what we're going to want to do is lead it with the heading mode. Then as we get on kind of the course we need to be, re-intercept the radial, then go back into the nav or the GPS mode. So we've got our airspeed, we've got our rate of descent under control here. Come down to about 1,000 feet per minute. That's kind of what I would like to do. And we're looking for about 8,000 feet, so another 2,000 feet to go. I don't have a lot of time in this aircraft, so I'm just going to have to learn some pitch and power settings that are going to work real well to generate a nice smooth rate of descent. But I've got it under control now. It's actually fairly stable of an aircraft once you kind of get it configured where it needs to be. Now as we're coming about 1,000 feet to go, you just saw me look up, and what I'm trying to do here is just start reducing that rate of descent down to about 500 feet per minute, which will make it easier for us to go ahead and level off. And then once we level off, we can once again re-engage the altitude hold mode. This is really kind of how it looks out here. It's just a whole lot of nothing. I swear, you know, every time I fly across the United States, I'm always thinking to myself, like, you know, when the settlers came west, who got out to like here and some other places, thought, you know, I'm good. Yeah, I could go to California, but I think this is fine. There's no trees. It's hot as hell. But I think I'm just going to park it here. I don't know, man. Just great swaths of the United States that just seem like completely uninhabitable by air. All right, so when should we kind of level off? Well, the rule of thumb is going to be 10% of your rate of descent. So I've already kind of started to cheat my way down here just a tad. But at this one, I'm coming down around 30, 40, 300, 400 feet per minute. We kind of want to level off 30, 40, 50 feet or so. Roughly kind of when you start that process. And that should help you arrest that rate of descent just in time. So then the goal here is just to kind of, there we go, we'll just kind of get it leveled out. re-engage the heading mode, we'll watch you can see the yoke will move a little bit. It can make some real minor adjustments, but for the most part are going to need to be pretty much trimmed out. I'm expecting this thing to actually start beeping at me any second. So I'm going to go ahead and set my heading to where it kind of probably needs to be, but I'm just going to kind of demonstrate if we don't lead it, kind of how far out of whack we're going to kind of get. Yeah, there we go. So there's the trim. You notice we've slowed up now from like 140 to 120. And so, you know, whenever you slow down, we're going to have to make a corresponding trim adjustment. Hope you guys remember that, but I think literally from episode 1 where we talked a lot about trimming the aircraft. And this is why it becomes important when you fly some of the modern stuff. It's not that big of a deal, or it'll do auto trimming for you, but understanding how and when to trim the aircraft is a really, really vital skill. Matter of fact, you know, I think I've mentioned before, I'm a mentor for my airline, and I have a bunch of, you know, cadets who are making their way through their time building. And it's really one of the very first things I tell them, especially for some of them who are kind of going through their instrument. I'm like, if you can develop the skill to have the aircraft perfectly in trim all the time, you will be a much, much better pilot. All right, it's starting to make its turn here under the nav, but if we looked right down at the autopilot, and below that is our turn coordinator, see that's like literally only a half rate turn. It's not even turning kind of like how you would want it to turn to kind of keep up. So as a consequence, as you see, if we look down at the GPS, we're swinging really, really wide. So if you wait to get to your point and then make the turn, you're definitely going to be behind the aircraft. So as we fly this aircraft and get better and better with it, what you're going to see is we're going to start anticipating the turns, going into heading mode where we are right now, and then trying to, then as we kind of get back on course here, I can make a corresponding intercept. And then as we get a little closer, then we can switch it over and move it over to the high mode or the nav mode. There we go. So close enough, like that'll probably, even that, quite frankly, will wiggle itself around, but in interest of, you know, workload, it'll be good enough. So at this stage, you know, I'm not planning on doing the ILS. I'm probably going to dial in the frequency. I already have the frequency up there. I'll dial in the heading here, but really, I'm not looking to fly the ILS. Matter of fact, what I think I'm going to do is this is going to put us right into the approach end south of Las Vegas. And so what I'll do is I think I'm just swing it a little bit wide, and we'll just do a little tour down the strip. So I think right about here, that's kind of like what I wanted to show you. Like I said, we're not going to do the ILS. So let me just cut you out here, and I'll rejoin you once we get down towards the strip. All right, we're heading directly towards the sphere and the strip. So I think at this point, probably just need to kick off the autopilot. And enjoy the ride. So I haven't been to Vegas in a long time. normally we stay just right next to the sphere, and like right behind it is a real large like Ferris wheel. Yeah, right there. And I'm at that hotel that's right behind that Ferris wheel right there. So this used to be one of my favorite spots to go. I don't really do any gambling when I'm out here, but there's always just a ton of activities you can do. So, and I would get in probably around 11 o'clock at night, Vegas time, and I wouldn't leave till midnight the next day. So I had like a good 24 hours in here. So I'm just going to put in our first notch of flaps, start slowing us up. We're just going to kind of make like a kind of a modified, like a left base entry into McCarran. And you can see it's like literally located right on the strip right there. So from the airport to the strip there is, I don't know, 5-10 minutes with traffic, tops. Just coming around the backside of Caesar's Palace there. I think if there's one place that probably needs a scenery pack, this is probably it. These buildings are a bit rough. And that's the Luxor right out there off our left-hand side there, that pyramid kind of looking-ish thing. It's got like this massive search beam at the very top of the pyramid that you can see, I don't know, a couple hundred miles out. It's very cool. All right, so let's just kind of get prepared to land here. So looking at around, see, bringing our second notch of flaps, doing about 100 miles an hour, sorry, about 100 miles an hour. We should be doing around, I don't know, 90 or so. Doing okay right here. Last I checked, the weather is calm, so we can basically take any runway, though. Looks like everyone's going to be taking off the other way, so call it a kamikaze mission. Airport elevation's about 2,000 feet or so, roughly. So about 400 feet to go. Flying out here in the summer in the 320 and really in the 321 when you're heavy can be a little bit problematic. Really have a hard time. There's some of these SIDs have some mandatory altitude requirements. Anyways, let's just cut power. See if I can bring it in.
You greased that landing, Ace.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Should probably get over back on centerline though.
Transporter from dispatch. Clear the runway and taxi to parking.
So, what is up with those planes up there? They're like mating. Okay, anyways. Bit of a long flight and a lot of yippity yap today. I apologize. But we hopefully can kind of get the basics of the aircraft down. We'll definitely be doing more, probably specifically detailed stuff like an ILS and some other things. As I mentioned earlier, I just plan on this probably as our last single for this playthrough, unless someone really has something they'd like to see. And if you do, definitely leave me a comment down below. I would definitely check it out. But I think probably for the channel and probably for some teaching stuff, it's probably time to move on to some twins. And there are a lot of great twins we can choose from. There is the by A2A Studios, they have a twin that they just released. It's still actually early access, but it's really good. The 600. There is the Black Square Turbine Duke, the Piston Duke, and there's a couple other aircraft I definitely would like to check out. I'm tempted to get the Coronado, the Beechcraft 55, but we'll see. I'm not a big fan of Coronado stuff. But anyways, we'd be taxing her for another 10 minutes. So I'm just going to pretend this little fueling hut is our FBO, and I think I will call it a flight here. Once again, I appreciate all the support.
Disembarking of passengers can begin.
Please leave a like, subscribe, comment. It has helped out the channel tremendously, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care for now. Bye.